Clara, a dedicated career woman, found herself seated at her dining table, surrounded by the usual array of scattered papers and glowing screens of ongoing projects. Lately, life seemed like a never-ending loop of deadlines and client requests that consumed all her time and energy. This constant busyness had taken a toll not just on her well-being, but also on her relationship with Tom, her boyfriend of 3 years. Tom's presence had become increasingly sporadic, his attention diverted by his own demanding career in marketing. Their interactions had dwindled to brief exchanges and occasional, distracted conversations. Feeling particularly low after another long day of video calls and design revisions, Clara decided she needed at least one small pleasure to look forward to, an indulgence in her favorite comfort food, a large pepperoni pizza from her favorite local spot, Giorgio's Pizzeria. She dialed their number, greeted warmly by the familiar voice of the owner who knew her order by heart. "The usual, Clara." "We'll have it over in 30 minutes, he confirmed cheerfully. Hanging up, Clara attempted to refocus on her work, but her heart wasn't in it. She was tired of always working, tired of eating alone, tired of waiting for Tom to come home at a reasonable hour. As she set her work aside, a wave of sadness washed over her. She missed how things used to be with Tom, the dinners out, the lazy Sundays in bed, the easy laughter that had seemed a permanent part of their life together. Now, it felt as if they were living parallel lives, connected more by memory than by the reality of their current existence. As she waited for the pizza, Clara pondered her relationship. Was this just a rough patch, as all couples have, or was it something more, something deeper that hinted at a growing chasm between them? The doorbell's ring interrupted her thoughts, pulling her back to the present. She opened the door expecting the usual delivery boy, but instead found herself face to face with Jake. A new face, holding her pizza and, surprisingly, a small cake accompanied by decorations. "Surprise, Tom wanted to make tonight a little special for you," Jake announced, his smile friendly and a bit apologetic, as if he sensed her confusion and isolation. Clara was stunned, not just by the unexpected gesture, but by the realization that Tom had remembered her mentioning offhand that today marked the anniversary of her promotion last year, a career milestone. As Jake stepped inside to set up the impromptu celebration, Clara felt a mix of emotions. She was touched by Tom's gesture, yet it also served as a poignant reminder of his absence. Here he was, reaching out in his way, yet through someone else. It was sweet, it was thoughtful, and yet it underscored the emotional distance that had crept into their lives. Tonight, her quiet evening alone had turned into something else entirely. A surprise that was about to change the course of her evening, and perhaps her relationship in ways she hadn't anticipated. As Clara stood there, slightly dazed by the unexpected celebration unfolding in her once quiet living room, Jake began to unpack the small box he had brought with him. Inside, there were a few colorful streamers, some balloons, and a modest but beautifully decorated cake that read, "Congrats on your promo. Love, Tom." "Tom arranged all this for you," Jake explained as he started to drape the streamers across the living room. "He mentioned how hard you've been working and that he's really sorry he couldn't be here tonight. He hopes this makes up for it a bit." Clara nodded, her emotions a tangled web. She was indeed touched by Tom's gesture. It was thoughtful and sweet, and it reminded her of the Tom she fell in love with, the one who used to surprise her with little acts of kindness when they first started dating. Yet, the fact that Tom couldn't be there himself, that he had delegated this intimate gesture to someone else, stung. It was like a bittersweet reminder of how their relationship had changed, how they had drifted apart amidst their demanding careers. As Jake continued setting up, turning her living space into a mini celebration zone, Clara forced a smile. "Thank you, Jake, for doing this. It means a lot that Tom thought of this, and that you're helping out." "Oh, it's no trouble at all," Jake responded with a warm smile. "I'm just glad to be part of making your day a bit brighter." His easy demeanor and genuine smile were disarming, and Clara found herself feeling grateful for his presence, a proxy for the celebration Tom had envisioned. They sat down at the dining table, where Jake served a slice of cake for each of them. As they ate, Jake shared more about how he knew Tom from college and had recently started his own delivery business. His stories were light and humorous, providing a welcome distraction from Clara's more melancholic thoughts. As the evening progressed, Clara found herself enjoying Jake's company far more than she had expected. He was easy to talk to, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in her life and her work. They laughed over shared college experiences, despite having attended different schools, and discussed favorite spots in the city where they both had grown up. The surprise celebration, meant to be a simple gesture of love from Tom, had evolved into an evening of new acquaintances and unexpected connections. Clara felt a strange mix of appreciation and confusion. She was happy, yes, but also sad, reflective on what her relationship with Tom had become, and how someone she had just met was filling the evening with laughter and conversation, a role she wished Tom could have filled. As Jake packed up to leave, Clara thanked him again, her words laced with genuine warmth. "This was really wonderful, Jake. Thank you for making the effort." Jake smiled. "I'm glad I could help make it special. Tom's a lucky guy, you know." "Yes, he is," Clara replied, the words slipping out before she could think them through, carrying a weight that lingered in the air as Jake closed the door behind him. As Jake finished setting up the modest celebration, he pulled up a chair opposite Clara at her dining table, the colorful streamers casting playful shadows across the room. "So, Tom tells me you're into old movies too?" he asked, sparking a conversation that piqued Clara's interest. "Yes, I love classic cinema," Clara responded, her spirits lifting as she engaged in a topic close to her heart. "There's something about the storytelling and the charisma of actors from the golden age of Hollywood that modern movies just can't capture." Jake nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely, I grew up watching them with my parents." "Have you seen Casablanca?" he asked, a smile playing on his lips. "Of course." "Casablanca is one of my favorites. The ending gets me every time," Clara said, returning the smile. The conversation effortlessly drifted from favorite movies to their love of music, particularly jazz and blues, which both had discovered in their teenage years. "It's the soul in the music. It just feels more raw, more real," Jake explained why he was drawn to old records. Clara agreed, mentioning how she would scour thrift stores looking for vinyl records to add to her collection. As they shared stories and laughed over their mutual eccentricities, Clara realized how comfortable she felt around Jake. It was a natural connection, easy and unforced, which was refreshing, especially given the recent emotional distance that had characterized her interactions with Tom. Jake's presence, his easy laughter and attentive listening, brought a warmth to the evening that Clara hadn't expected, but found herself immensely grateful for. The joy of connecting over shared interests was a reminder of how spontaneous and uplifting conversations with new acquaintances could be. Jake's knowledge about various topics, his anecdotes about unexpected adventures while setting up his delivery business, and his humble yet passionate demeanor about life's simple pleasures resonated with Clara. She found herself sharing more freely than she had in months, her own stories spilling out in the cozy atmosphere of the impromptu celebration. This exchange, while simple, was profoundly impactful for Clara. It reminded her of the importance of connection, of feeling understood and sharing moments of genuine interest and enthusiasm with another person. She hadn't realized just how much she had missed this dynamic, this exchange of ideas and laughter, in her own relationship. As Jake prepared to leave, thanking Clara for a lovely evening and apologizing for not being able to stay longer, Clara felt a mix of happiness and melancholy. The night had brought unexpected joy and a sense of connection that was deeply fulfilling. "Thank you for tonight, Jake. It was really great talking to someone so passionate about the same things I am," Clara said, genuinely appreciative. Jake smiled. "It was my pleasure." It's not every day you meet someone who can talk about Casablanca and Charlie Parker in the same conversation. Let's do it again sometime. Clara nodded. "I'd like that," she replied, feeling a spark of anticipation at the prospect of continuing their discussions on film and music. As the door closed behind Jake, Clara was left with a sense of gratitude for the evening's unexpected pleasures and a newfound appreciation for the simple joy of connection. As they sat across from each other, sharing the pizza Jake had delivered, the conversation took a turn from light-hearted banter to more substantial topics. Clara, feeling unexpectedly comfortable, began to share more personal aspects of her life. She talked about the dreams she had when she first started her career, the aspirations to create impactful work, and how somewhere along the line, amid the pursuit of success, she felt she had lost a part of herself. Jake listened intently, nodding in understanding as he shared his own experiences of starting a business, the ups and downs, and the constant battle between personal satisfaction and professional obligations. It's like you're constantly chasing something, and when you stop to catch your breath, you realize how much you've missed, he said, his voice tinged with a hint of regret. Clara felt a connection in their shared experiences, a mutual understanding that went beyond casual friendship. It was comforting to talk to someone who understood the sacrifices and the often overlooked personal costs of pursuing one's ambitions. As the night grew deeper, Clara found herself discussing her relationship with Tom, how they had started with so much love and excitement, and how gradually the space between them had grown, filled with unspoken disappointments and silent grievances. "I feel like we're roommates sometimes, not partners. He's here, but he's not really here," Clara confessed, the words spilling out before she could temper them. She looked down at her hands, fidgeting with the napkin on her lap, her voice a whisper of vulnerability. Jake reached across the table, his hand lightly covering hers in a gesture of support. "That's really tough, Clara. But it's good that you're acknowledging these feelings. It's the first step towards figuring out what you really need, what you both might need to change," he offered, his voice soft and encouraging. The warmth of his touch was reassuring, and Clara felt a surge of gratitude for his empathy and the simple act of listening without judgment. They continued to talk, not just about the challenges, but also about the possible ways to bridge the gaps in her relationship with Tom, discussing communication styles, the importance of setting aside time for each other, and the need to actively engage in each other's lives. As the evening came to a close, Clara felt a sense of relief. A weight lifted. Sharing her feelings with Jake had not only helped her articulate what she felt was lacking, but also illuminated paths she might take to address these issues. The evening had unexpectedly turned into a much-needed session of sharing and reflection, providing Clara with insights she knew she needed to consider seriously. Jake's understanding and the easy rapport they had developed made Clara feel less alone in her struggles. As he packed up to leave, promising to check in on her and offering any help he could provide, Clara felt a renewed sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things could get better, with or without Tom. The key was communication, something she was now more determined than ever to improve in her life. The evening had stretched comfortably into night, and the room was filled with the soft glow of the lamps as Clara and Jake continued their conversation. They had been chatting for hours, and without either of them noticing, the space between them had gradually lessened. Laughter had flowed freely, and their exchanges had grown increasingly personal and introspective. In this warm atmosphere, a palpable connection had formed, one that felt almost tangible. As Jake recounted a particularly funny anecdote about his early days in the delivery business, Clara laughed, her eyes lighting up with amusement. In that moment, caught up in the laughter, Jake looked at her, really looked, and saw not just the laughter but the woman beneath, the vibrant, passionate individual who had so candidly shared her dreams and fears with him. It was a look that spoke volumes, crossing the unspoken boundary that had silently governed their interaction until then. Driven by the warmth of the moment, Jake's hand reached out, brushing Clara's. The contact was brief, but electric. Their laughter faded as they became acutely aware of each other. The air shifted, charged with a new energy, an unspoken question hanging between them. Then, almost as if drawn by a force beyond their control, they leaned closer, their faces inches apart. The world around them seemed to pause. The only reality that mattered was the here and now. The kiss, when it came, was gentle, hesitant at first, then deepening as if affirming the connection they both felt, but hadn't dared to acknowledge until now. It was a kiss that seemed to stop time, a kiss that spoke of shared loneliness, understanding, and a mutual craving for connection. But as quickly as the moment had escalated, it dissolved. Clara pulled back, her mind reeling from the sudden rush of emotions. The warmth of the kiss was quickly replaced by a chill of reality. What had she done? This wasn't her. She wasn't someone who forgot her commitments, her relationship with Tom, no matter the state it was in. I'm sorry, Jake. I shouldn't have let that happen, Clara stammered, her voice a mix of confusion and regret. She stood up abruptly, needing physical distance to match the sudden emotional barrier she had reinstated. Jake stood as well, his expression a mixture of concern and understanding. Clara, I'm sorry too. I got carried away and I didn't stop to think. It was irresponsible and I apologize if I've made things uncomfortable, he said sincerely, his voice low. The room felt colder now, the warmth of their earlier connection replaced by a tense awkwardness. Clara nodded, struggling to compose herself. It's not just you. I was there too. But I need to sort out my life, my relationship. I can't go on like this, she said, her voice firm, yet sad. Jake agreed, the regret in his eyes mirroring her own. I understand, and I respect that. If there's anything I can do, just say the word, he offered, his tone respectful and supportive. As Jake left, Clara was left alone with her thoughts, the echo of the door closing sounding much louder than it should have. The night had started as a celebration, an unexpected joy, but now it felt like a turning point. What had begun as an innocent evening had ended with a revelation that Clara could not ignore. She needed to make some difficult decisions about her life and where she was headed. Sitting in the quiet aftermath of the phone call with Tom, Clara felt a turmoil of emotions swirling inside her. The confession had been one of the hardest things she had ever done, laying bare the vulnerabilities and disconnects that had crept into their relationship. Now she awaited Jake's arrival, knowing that they too had things to address. When Jake knocked and entered, his demeanor was cautious, his usual easy smile tempered by the seriousness of the situation. He looked at Clara, searching her face for signs of how to proceed. Clara, about earlier, Jake began, his voice earnest. I'm really sorry if that kiss made things difficult for you. I got carried away, and it wasn't fair to you or Tom. Clara nodded, appreciating his apology and the sincerity behind it. Thank you, Jake. I enjoyed our time together today, more than I expected. But that kiss shouldn't have happened, she admitted, her voice faltering slightly as she confronted the reality of their actions. Jake took a seat, keeping a respectful distance, but leaning forward to emphasize his attentiveness. I understand, he said. And I want you to know that I respect whatever decision you need to make. I'm here as a friend, Clara. Nothing more unless you decide otherwise in the future, under different circumstances. Clara felt a weight lift slightly at his words, the pressure of navigating her feelings for Jake while still being committed to sorting things out with Tom. I'm glad to hear you say that, Jake. I need some space to figure things out with Tom. We're going to take some time apart to think about what we really want from our relationship. Jake nodded, his expression one of understanding. That sounds like a wise decision. Relationships are complicated, and sometimes distance gives you the perspective you need. The room was filled with a bittersweet sense of understanding and resignation. They both knew that whatever friendship might have been possible was now tinted by the complexity of the emotions involved. I hope you and Tom find your way back to each other, Jake said, standing to leave. You both deserve happiness, whether it's together or apart. Clara stood as well, feeling the finality of the moment. Thank you, Jake, for everything today. You've been a great friend. As Jake left, Clara sat back down, her mind a mix of sadness and resolve. She was committed to making the most out of the space she and Tom had agreed upon, to reflect on her own desires and priorities. This time would be crucial for her to determine if the path she was on with Tom was one they could continue together, or if the joy and connection she had felt with Jake was a sign of what was missing in her life. The decision lay ahead, and while daunting, Clara felt empowered to face it head-on, knowing that honesty with herself and Tom was the key to finding true happiness. The evening had turned into night, and the lingering awkwardness from Jake's departure was palpable. Alone, Clara dialed Tom's number, her heart racing as the phone rang. When Tom answered, his voice casual and unaware of the storm brewing on the other end, Clara took a deep breath. "Tom, we need to talk," she began, her voice shaking despite her best efforts to remain calm. "Sure, what's up?" Tom responded, a hint of concern creeping into his tone as he sensed the seriousness in her voice. Clara paused, gathering her thoughts. "It's about us. About our relationship," she started. "I feel like we've been drifting apart for a while now, and I need to be honest about something that happened tonight." Tom was silent on the other end, and Clara took it as her cue to continue. "A friend of yours, Jake, came over tonight with a surprise you arranged. We talked, and things got a bit out of hand. We kissed." The words hung heavily in the air. Was a pause, long enough for Clara to feel the weight of every second. Then Tom spoke, his voice tight with mixed emotions. "I see," he said simply. "Is there something going on between you two?" "No, nothing ongoing," Clara hurried to explain. "It just happened, and I regret it, Tom. It made me realize how lonely I've felt, how much we've missed connecting with each other." Tom sighed heavily, the sound of it carrying his weariness and disappointment. "I've been feeling it too," he admitted. "The distance between us. I'm sorry I haven't been there for you, Clara. I've allowed my work to create a gap in our relationship, and I regret that." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes, relief and sadness mingling in her response. "What do we do about us, Tom?" "I don't want to give up on us, but I can't go on feeling this way." "We need to figure out if we can fix this," Tom said after a moment, his voice firmer, more resolved. "Maybe we should take some time to think about what we really want from this relationship. See if we can find a way back to each other." Clara nodded to herself, wiping away a tear. "I think that's a good idea. Let's take some time to think and then come back together to talk." "Okay," Tom agreed. "I love you, Clara. I hope we can find a way through this." "I love you too," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible, filled with hope and fear for what the future might hold. They ended the call, each left to ponder their own thoughts and emotions. Clara sat back, feeling a mix of guilt for the kiss and relief at having been honest with Tom. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she also felt a flicker of hope that this painful honesty might lead them back to a stronger, more sincere connection. In the following days, Clara dedicated herself to deep reflection. With the physical space from Tom providing her the emotional room she needed to think, she began to journal her thoughts and feelings, a process that helped her articulate the confusion and clarity that aboded in turns. Each page filled with her handwriting was a map of her internal landscape, a mix of nostalgia for the early days with Tom, the pain of their growing distance, and the surprising joy that had sparked with Jake. During long walks in the park near her apartment, Clara allowed herself to ponder the what-ifs. What if she and Tom hadn't grown apart? What if Jake had never entered her life? These walks became a therapeutic ritual, where the rhythm of her steps brought a cadence to her thoughts, helping her sift through her emotions and the realities of her relationships. One afternoon, sitting on a park bench under the shade of a large oak tree, Clara realized that her heart was pulling her in a direction she had been reluctant to acknowledge. The connection with Jake had been unexpected, but powerful, highlighting what was missing in her relationship with Tom. It wasn't just about the thrill of newness with Jake. It was about feeling understood and valued, feelings that had faded with Tom over time. However, Clara knew that jumping from one relationship into another was not the answer. She needed time to be on her own, to rediscover who she was outside of her relationships with Tom and Jake. This clarity came with a resolve to speak with Tom about taking a formal break, a decision that was as daunting as it was necessary. When Clara met Tom for coffee to discuss her thoughts, The conversation was emotional but grounded in the honesty that had marked their recent interactions. She explained her need for space and time, not just to think, but to grow. "I need to find myself again, Tom. I've lost too much of who I am, and I need to get that back," Clara explained, her voice steady but her hands trembling slightly. Tom listened, his face a mix of sadness and understanding. After a pause, he agreed. "I think you're right, Clara. I've felt us drifting apart too, and maybe some space is what we both need to figure out what we truly want. I love you, and I want you to be happy, even if that happiness isn't with me." They decided then, over coffee, that they would take a significant break. No deadline set, just an agreement to come back together when they both felt ready to talk, to see where they stood. Clara left the coffee shop feeling a mixture of grief and relief. The path forward was not going to be easy, but it was honest, and it was hers to walk. As she walked back through the park, the same paths she had trodden in contemplation countless times before, she felt a sense of empowerment. This time was for her, to heal, to explore, to create a life that felt true to her heart, regardless of where it would lead. Sitting in the solitude of her apartment, Clara picked up her phone, hesitating only a moment before dialing Jake's number. The connection established, she heard his voice, warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cool silence around her. "Hey, Jake, it's Clara. I hope it's a good time to talk," she began, her voice slightly nervous but clear. "Hey, Clara, yeah, it's a good time. How are you holding up?" Jake responded, his tone conveying genuine concern and a hint of happiness to hear from her. Clara took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. "I'm okay, thanks. I've been doing a lot of thinking. Tom and I decided to take a break. We both need some time to figure out what we really want," she shared, her words measured, revealing the weight of her decision. Jake listened silently, allowing her the space to explain without interruption. "I see. That sounds like a tough but important decision," he finally replied, his voice supportive. "Yeah, it was hard, but necessary. And actually, I was hoping we could meet up and talk. There's a lot I'd like to discuss, and I also want to understand more about where we could go from here," Clara continued, the invitation hanging between them, charged with possibilities. "Of course, I'd like that. How about we grab coffee tomorrow afternoon? There's a quiet place near the park, if that works for you," Jake suggested, the ease in his suggestion belying the significance of their impending meeting. "That sounds perfect," Clara said, a smile spreading across her face, her first genuine smile in what felt like a long time. They set the time and place, and after a few more pleasantries, the call ended. Clara put down her phone, feeling a mix of relief and excitement. A new chapter was beginning, and for the first time in a long while, she felt hopeful about the future. The next day, as Clara walked to the coffee shop, her thoughts were a whirlwind of possibilities. Meeting Jake felt different now. It was no longer just about friendship or a momentary lapse in judgment. It was about exploring something deeper, something potentially significant. She felt ready to find out if the connection they had was as profound as it had seemed, ready to take a chance on happiness again. Sitting across from Jake in the coffee shop, the conversation flowed as naturally as ever. They talked about everything from their favorite books and movies to their aspirations and fears. The more they talked, the clearer it became that their connection was real and filled with potential. As they left the coffee shop, walking side by side through the park, Clara felt a sense of companionship and understanding that she hadn't realized she'd been missing. "Thanks for meeting me, Jake. This feels right," she admitted, looking over at him with a tentative but hopeful smile. Jake looked back at her, his expression mirroring her own. "It does, doesn't it? Let's see where this goes," he said, his hand finding hers as they continued to walk, their steps in sync, their hearts tentatively aligning with the promise of new beginnings. Clara and Jake's walks through the park became a regular occurrence, each step and conversation deepening the bond that had tentatively begun over unexpected circumstances. With the freshness of early spring adding a crispness to the air, their meetings were filled with discussions about personal growth, the complexities of relationships, and their individual hopes for the future. It was during one of these walks that Clara found the courage to delve deeper into her feelings about her ongoing break with Tom and her growing closeness with Jake. "Jake, these past weeks have been enlightening," Clara started, her voice carrying a mix of earnestness and caution. "I've learned a lot about myself, what I need in a relationship, and what I had been missing." Jake listened attentively, nodding in understanding. "I've noticed changes in you, Clara. You seem more at peace, more grounded," he observed, his eyes reflecting both his admiration for her and his deepening feelings. Clara smiled, appreciating his perceptiveness. "I do feel more at peace. Part of that comes from these talks with you. You've been incredible through all of this. I can talk to you about anything. It's something I've not had in a long time." They continued walking, the path winding through trees that were just beginning to bud, a metaphor not lost on either of them. "I've been thinking about us," Clara continued, her voice slightly hesitant as she broached the subject she had been pondering. "About what this is becoming. It's clear there's something between us, something I want to explore." Jake's response was measured but hopeful. "I feel the same, Clara. I've been careful, mindful of your situation with Tom. I want to respect that process. But I also want to be honest about how I feel. I care about you more than I expected to," he admitted, his tone revealing the depth of his feelings. The admission hung between them, heartfelt and significant. They stopped walking, facing each other. Clara reached out, taking Jake's hands in hers, her decision clear. "I care about you too, Jake. I think we owe it to ourselves to see where this could go," she said, the vulnerability in her statement tempered by the resolve in her eyes. Jake squeezed her hands gently, affirming their mutual desire to move forward. "Let's take this step, then. Together," he agreed, his voice firm with conviction. As they resumed their walk, the conversation shifted to more practical matters. How they would navigate this new phase of their relationship, how they would communicate their needs and expectations. They discussed setting boundaries and ensuring that they continued to respect each other's independence and personal growth. By the time they parted ways that afternoon, a new chapter had begun for both of them, one filled with the promise of discovery and the potential for deep, meaningful companionship. Clara walked home feeling lighter, more confident, and genuinely hopeful about the future. The path ahead would surely have its challenges, but for the first time in a long while, she felt equipped to face them, not alone, but together with Jake, as they explored the possibilities of a new beginning.